Hi, everyone. This is KLMeri.
And this is Soda.
We have returned in 2025 to for our first podcast of the year to talk about and review Lower Decks season 5, which is also the final season of Lower Decks.
Yeah, and to also kind of give our overview of the series as a whole, considering that's the last season.
It's going to be great to have a look back, Soda, at where we started with the show
Yeah,
and where it finally ended. So, 5 seasons.
5 seasons.
What, 10
Yeah,
episodes apiece?
yeah. It's really when you look at like overall time, like the runtime of the show as a whole. It's like it's the shortest show since the original animated series because it's 10 episodes per season, only 5 seasons, and each episode is only like 22 episodes, 22 minutes, right?
They're like under 25 minutes.
Yeah, so I think it is the shortest show since the original animated series.
I guess we don't have like Prodigy to compare it to, for example, right?
Uh,
Because that's still ongoing.
yeah, Prodigy is still ongoing, so I don't think it's fair to still compare it. And Prodigy has 20 episodes per season, so they already are at like they're already almost at the same runtime as Lower Decks. If they
Mhm.
have another season, they'll overrun it. So
Yeah.
yeah, my point still stands.
I think as we've talked about over multiple podcasts, over all the seasons that we've reviewed this far, Lower Decks is a quality show.
Yeah, I think it's probably the most like beloved Star Trek show of the new era currently, right?
Hmm. Right.
I feel like this maybe maybe it's like kind of a biased view from like the fan community. Maybe among like casual viewers, other shows are more popular. But I feel like uh, by judging by the buzz on the internet, Lower Decks is like the most universally beloved show.
I think that's correct. I mean, I would agree with that sentiment. Um, every season is done well, and they've obviously had the green light to keep doing it up to 5 seasons. Um, I think that speaks for itself. So, if we just talk about how we feel going into watching what we know is the final season, it's a little sad, right?
Yeah,
Particularly because it has been such a good show. Um, I think across the board, we've enjoyed the characters, the comedy, the continual like references to all the other shows, and it's been a fan's delight. So I know that when I had to kind of prep myself mentally for watching this season because there were a lot of things I expected out of it, but at the same time I was going, I'm not going to get to see any more of this after it.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting because I'm not sure that the creators themselves knew this was going to be the last
Mhm.
season. Did you get the impression that they knew?
I got the impression towards the end that they knew, that they had been told something because of the way of the things that were happening at the end of the season. But
Mm,
I actually agree with you. At the beginning of the season, it was very business as usual. um, and to me, it was actually a little slow, and the episodes were very light.
yeah, I mean, I don't know because it's an animated show, the process of making an animated show is a little different than the process of making a live action
Hmm.
show. It's very hard to make like last minute changes to add like another
Hmm.
scene or something like that because animation takes time and
Yeah.
you have to record the voices first and then you have to do the animation. So I don't know if they if they were told something toward the end, it means they were told something toward the end of the writing process. So I don't think they were actually told toward the end of the writing process.
Hmm.
That's why I got the impression that maybe they didn't know until like a very late stage in the production, where it was too late to do something about it
Hmm.
as an animated show.
Yeah, which is interesting, right? Because I mean, we're as viewers coming in knowing it's the end.
Yeah,
And so that changes what we expect out of it versus had we thought that we were going to get another season and we could be left with like open-ended questions or things like that. So it's just different in the way that the viewers approach it, which is interesting because as you're saying, if production didn't know and they had, scripted everything, voiced everything and were producing it, did they tell the story or wrap the story up in a way that they would have knowing they wouldn't get another chance?
yeah. I am wondering that. I'm wondering if they knew ahead of time what kind of season we would have gotten.
Hmm. Yeah. I'm actually glad you raised that point because like I said, I went into it with a certain amount of these are the things I want to see because I know it's the last season. And I think in at least the first half of it, I was going,
Yeah,
it's just, again, business as usual, like the kind of episodes we've seen all along, and it's moving at its normal pace. So it surprised me a little bit.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so shall we just jump into talking about each episode?
Yeah. Okay, so the first episode, Dos Cerritos, it picks up from where we left off, which is how Lodex usually does it. Tandy still with the Orion Pirates. Um, the Cerritos get sucked into a parallel universe where, like, Captain Freeman made a different choice and she got stuck at, like, base. I can't remember the funny base.
Mm-hmm.
And
Starbase 80.
80, yeah, Starbase
Yeah.
80. And Mariner became the captain instead of her, and Boimler is the first officer. Um, and of course, our Cerritos are trying to find a way to get back home, but then it turns out that, Captain Mariner hates being a captain and wants to go back and replace our Mariner. It kind of sets the tone for the entire season because the season will kind of deal with parallel universes, which is not, it's a trendy topic right now in sci-fi, but it's not new for Star Trek.
Yeah.
Star Trek had a parallel universes since the 60s. I mean, it had the original parallel universe, the famous one, um, and but that will be, but it does feel like, trend writing to me because I don't know. I didn't like this season's theme as much as I like the previous season's themes.
Mm-hmm. When we talk about this first episode, I mean, really what we get out of it is we know that the four lieutenants that we've been following, they're lieutenants now, right?
Yeah,
Um, Tendi is separated from the other three because she chose to leave Starfleet. So there's something going on with her story there, and like, how does she get back to Starfleet?
well,
Um,
she kind of had to leave Starfleet. She
yeah,
wants
yeah,
to
yeah.
come back, but yeah,
And then what's the rest of the crew doing without Tendi? And also this introduction of, I think it's in this episode, this talk about there's something going on that the Cerritos is looking into, and that's these tears in the in space time.
yeah,
Right, they're just kind of doing their normal missions, and in the middle of that there's just something weird going on that they're just kind of keeping track of.
yeah.
Yep.
We are also introduced to the concept. There we go. Concept of Boimler kind of sees his parallel universe, alternate self,
Hmm.
and he wants to be that guy, so he keeps his alternate self's diary or personal log.
Yeah,
And
he steals the pad or the tablet that they call it.
yeah, and he's trying to imitate him. And one funny thing that happens almost every episode is we see him slowly growing his beard.
Yeah. So we're gonna talk about that as we go through the episodes. But
Yeah,
yeah, that's certainly a progress for him. But it's quite interesting because Cerritos that shows up, right, however briefly, is captained by Mariner.
yeah,
There's no Freeman. This really bothers Captain Freeman. She's like, "Where am I? What do you mean? I'm like on Starbase 80."
yeah.
Um, she's just like, "What could possibly happen to me that I'm not in the captain's seat?" Obviously we have like bearded Boimler, who, to be honest, looks a lot like Riker.
I think that's the point. I think that's the
Yeah.
point.
We have like a fully cyborg Rutherford.
Yeah,
Obviously Tendi is like not there on this Cerritos, so it's very much a mirror of like kind of the state they're in, from the friend group is.
yeah.
And then Talin actually looks or kind of acts almost identical,
Of
except for like
course.
the one word that they say differently.
Hmm.
Say for Mariner, Freeman, and Boimler, um, probably that they were the three most bothered by their other selves and what they were doing.
Yeah,
Except Boimler was jealous of himself. He had
yeah,
envy. That was obvious. And Freeman was just like, "There's no way I'm gonna end up in the the worst starbase ever."
yeah.
And then Mariner was just like, "Who would want to be a captain?" But then she also finds out her captain self is very totalitarian. uh, so yeah, it was interesting, but I on this one obviously it was a setup. It's the first episode. It was like a setup episode of the season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next episode, Shades of Green, is kind of a part two because it deals with, well, Tandy's story. She's back on Orion. She's working for her sister, who is the head of the family now. There is a war between their faction and the Blue Orions. We get a return of the Blue Orions. The Blue Orions from the original animated series, who look like, old school aliens from like 50s.
It's great. It's animated
Yeah.
series. uh,
Yeah, they look ridiculous.
Version.
They act ridiculous. It's very classic lower decks humor, I think. Like take those old concepts and treat them super seriously. Um, because they are fighting with the Blue Orions, there is sort of a race. But then Tendi, of course, discovers that her sister is pregnant and becomes overprotective, and they lose the race to they almost lose the race to the Blue Orions because of Tendi's overprotectiveness. And then
Mhm.
Tendi discovers that everybody knew her sister, the Erica. Her sister, the Erica, was pregnant. The Erica didn't tell Tendi because she knew Tendi would want to stay because of that. And apparently,
Right.
Erica wants Tendi to go back to Starfleet, which is, it's kind of last season. The Erica was kind of very antagonistic to her Tendi.
Well, right,
She
because Tendi
was,
just kind of ditched her
yeah, but
for Starfleet.
yeah, but it feels like the kind of this change of heart just came out of nowhere
It's
to
true.
me. Like you were the one who orchestrated the whole issue that Tandy had to stay
Mhm.
behind in the first place. So why did you suddenly decide that she needs to leave? Are you suddenly okay with that? Um, kind of, it feels kind of rushed, but I also understand again because they only have 10 episodes and it's the last season, so you can't stick Tandy on Orion forever. Um, but Anyway, Tandy and Erica kind of have a heart, very short heart to heart, and they win the race, and Erica lets Tandy leave. Um, meanwhile, meanwhile, on the Cerritos, they're kind of helping the planet move to a post-scarcity economy. It's kind of a very short B story. I think the most interesting part is on the ship, Rutherford and Celine
Mm-hmm.
have a plot. Rutherford is working on a ship, on a shuttle that he worked on with Tandy, and he's very purposely keeping it kind of slow because he wants to complete the fix of the shuttle. He is waiting for Tandy to complete the work on the
Yeah.
shuttle. Celine doesn't understand it, so she fixes it all by herself overnight. Um, and then, she kind of talks with Rutherford and she gets it and she breaks the shuttle again so he'll have something to fix with Tandy. It's very that's a very cute story.
It is, and then she's purposely there. You can see to make an overture of getting to know Rutherford.
Yeah,
She's trying to connect with him, like not just as a coworker, but like to develop a friendship with him.
yeah,
And maybe she sees he's struggling because Tendy's gone, and Tendy was Rutherford's best friend.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, Celine is I think Celine is kind of the MVP of this season. She was like my
Yeah,
favorite, consistently my favorite throughout this entire season. Yeah, she's very obviously trying to connect with the people on the ship, and it's very sweet. And Tandy comes back. Tandy ends up coming back. So all is well.
and the other thing I'd mention is the background of story of what like Boimler and Mariner are doing. So they're essentially Starfleet's helping this colony like Targalus 9 or something like that. They're a they have decided to give up all their essential like their wealth, like their monetary financial system. Boimler and Mariner are down there, just assisting with the transition from that capitalist system. And it's quite hilarious because you see all these signs of like no cash accepted and no money, no problems. It's like a whole turnaround in ideology for this race. Um, Boimler, as you know, has trying to emulate his alternate self. He's decided he's going to be the fun boss, so he's actually in charge of some ensigns. And there's just a little
Yeah,
plot line going on where the ensigns go off and get into trouble, and like Boimler and Mariner have to go rescue them. So that's really what's going on with them.
yeah,
Just business as usual mission stuff.
exactly.
And
Um,
yeah, Boimler trying to grow facial hair.
yeah. The first signs of whiskers. Yeah.
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 So the third episode, which is the best exotic nanite hotel.
Yeah.
So we have Tendy back with the group, right? Essentially, the whole group, except Boimler. I'll get to that in a minute. But like Mariner, Rutherford, Tendy, T'Lyn, they're all tasked to go to this, essentially like this resort hotel where these nanites have kind of gotten out of control and are like in a sense like terrorizing the tourist because they're like eating all this technology and consuming energy, and Starfleet has to come down and kind of corral it and get it under control. Funny enough, we see Jennifer tag along. If you'll recall, Jennifer is Mariner's ex-girlfriend, but the catch here is Jennifer's acting like they never broke up.
Yeah.
So Jennifer kind of faded out in the background in the other seasons, and now we see that Mariner may not possibly have officially broken up with her, and so Mariner has to go through this whole farce where she acts like they're still together, and so it's quite funny because they end up arguing over like the best way to capture the rogue nanite. They all end up inside the nanite.
Yeah.
um, so this is really kind of a focus on like tying up the thread with Mariner and Jennifer's relationship. But it turns out that Jennifer was just faking it too. She was just pretending, even though she knew that they were broken up. She was trying to like get a little bit of revenge because they never actually officially told each
Broke up.
other that.
Yeah.
They just cut off communication, and she's like, Mariner, I was really upset about that. So,
Yeah.
meanwhile, Boimler has gotten a special mission. He's going with Billups and Ransom
Mm-hmm.
undercover as hotel tourists to unearth this, we'll say, this admiral who has gone AWOL. And this admiral has really ensconced himself into the life at this resort, and so they have to go through several dangerous situations in order to like get to him. And it's almost like he's the underground leader of these little rebels in this hotel. But Boimler has heard from, funny enough, Jet. Don't ever go on a mission with Ransom and Billups because they will throw you into the heart of the danger and you'll come out missing your hands. And so Boimler's very
He's worried
Boimler
that, yeah,
is
he's
so
worried that
worried
there's,
he's gonna die
yeah,
through the whole process. And of course, he's still growing his facial hair.
of course.
Um, but it turns out they actually find this admiral, and Boimler gets a little time to shine where he kind of tricks the admiral into thinking that he's on his side, and then they convince the admiral to go back to Starfleet and like actually give him a job maybe he could appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, another thing about this plot, the main plot, the nanites turned out to be controlled by a tiny ship from another parallel universe. So once again, the
Yes.
theme of a parallel universe ties into this episode too.
I was like, wow, okay. This to me was like the typical Lower Decks episode. Like
Yeah,
there's two storylines going on, addressing some like something about the relationship, one of their relationships. In this case, it was Mariner and Jennifer. Like they're just, you know, tying that up.
yeah.
And then to no one's surprise, Boimler off doing something that only Boimler gets to do, with leadership that makes him act like an idiot.
Yeah.
So, to me, the flavor of this particular episode was very much like many of the other episodes we've watched in the season.
Yeah, it really isn't anything
In the show, I mean.
special. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
nothing. Yeah,
Yeah. Like I said, nothing special. It's kind of like, okay, everybody's back together and they're off doing
yeah.
some missions.
This doesn't mean the episode is bad. It's just it's
No.
it's like the average Lower Decks episode.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Average Lower Decks episode.
Though once again, Talene I think stole the show with her favorite musician being on the resort.
Oh yeah. Talin, like I had forgotten about that. The vibe tubes.
Yeah.
And this like Krog musician, which she
Yeah.
helped use to defeat that little that nanite that was out of control.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, Talin steps in with a good idea and helps save the day.
Exactly.
Business as usual for her.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on.
Mm-hmm.
Now we get into some fun stuff, okay? Episode 4, A Farewell to Farms. If you'll recall in previous season, maybe it was 2 seasons ago, there were other lower deckers on other ships, and one of them was a Klingon ship, and one of them was named Ma. This Klingon Ma, actually took over his ship for a brief time. So that's kind of the background history there. But when we come in to see what Ma's doing today, he's back home on the farm.
Of course.
It's a blood wine producing farm.
Yeah.
With a bunch of targs. And so Ma is working with his brother. He's been kicked out of the Klingon fleet, if you will, very dishonorably, because he killed a guy, and the guy's brother decided to just kick him out.
Yeah.
He's living a life he clearly doesn't enjoy. Doesn't know what to do with himself, and along comes Mariner out of nowhere. Mariner's like, "Hey, I heard you got kicked out, and I'm gonna help you out."
Yeah.
So we have a little thing going on where Mariner, Ma, and his brother
Malor.
are
Yeah.
yeah. I forget his name, Malor.
Malor is
Are
pretty great, though.
Malor gets better. He does. He is pretty great. So
Yeah.
they're essentially one thing they're trying to do is Mariner's actually not there just because of Ma, right? There's some kind of rift that opened up in Klingon space, and they want a little help trying to, study that. In the meantime, she's come to see her bestie
Yeah.
and realizes he's in a pickle. So she's going to help him get back into the fleet, right? But they have to go through these 3 trials to
Mm-hmm.
prove that he deserves to be back in the fleet. And obviously, the council who's observing or judging the trials, one of the council members is the brother of the captain that Ma killed. So they're somewhat actively working against them.
Exactly.
Um, it's quite. I don't know how to describe it other than I really enjoyed the Klingon plot.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a fun Klingon plot. Um, I
um,
much less enjoyed the B plot, which has to
oh
do with
no.
Dr. Miglimo.
So we get to learn like what Miglimo is. Um,
Yeah.
what do they call them? Colloquian or something like that. It's this bird race. Okay.
Yeah.
There's 2 very famous critics coming on to the Cerritos.
Cloakins or
Uh,
something like that, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they're Legnog and like Golnid. They have these interesting names. So anyway, they're food critics. Well, they're critics
Yeah.
of a lot of things, but they're primarily food critics. And Meekly Mo is so excited to meet them. They're like celebrities, and they just poo poo everything. All the food that they put in front of them, the decor, the humans. They're very like pretentious, elitist type individuals. And so the B plot here is that they essentially have to, or they figure out in a way that these 2 critics are actually frauds. They can't
Yeah.
smell anything, they can't taste anything. So they're just saying everything's terrible, just out of a hiding, that they actually can't do their jobs because they're so famous. You've got to keep that
Yeah.
status.
Yeah.
Meekly
Um
Mo
yeah,
gets no respect from them at
yeah.
all because he's in Starfleet. It's quite
Because
funny.
his entire race is all about food, and he chose a career that has nothing to do with food, so they look down on him. Yeah, we are not big fans of Miglimo over here.
No. And I was kind
So
of like,
yeah.
did you just
Um,
decide like nobody knows anything about
but
this character?
yeah,
Maybe
I
we'll
don't know
give
if you
him a
noticed,
little
a
plot.
cloaca is like it's a bird's it's essentially a bird's genital,
Yeah.
which is how I remember this name
Oh,
for your
maybe I would have
species.
remembered the name if I had known
Um,
that.
but yeah,
So yeah, Meekly Mo gets his like moment in the spotlight as this, I don't know why. I guess they just decided maybe we need to know a little bit about more about his character.
yeah,
Um, but that's pretty much it for the episode. The best part of it is obviously the Klingon plot. We land where Ma basically he actually earns back the right to be in charge of a fleet,
yeah,
to be a captain, but he chooses not to do it, and returns to the farm to sort of start from the bottom up. And he gets his brother Malor to be his first crew member. So they're on their little small ship that they use to transport blood wine. And yeah, He's starting over.
Yeah. It's very sweet. I like Ma. He's a good character. It's kind of annoying that he had to share the episode with Wiggly Mo, which, as we've established, we're not fans. But I did like to see Ma one last time.
Yeah. And again, there's just that running theme of there's another rip in space.
Yeah,
And what is it?
there is another whip in space. Yeah,
So moving on to episode 5.
we are finally getting to see the very mysterious Starbase 80 in the episode that is very aptly named Starbase 80.
Yeah, Starbase 80. Oh, as you can imagine, Captain Freeman does not have a good feeling about Starbase 80. She learned that her alternate self had been stationed there. It's like the worst place you can send a Starfleet officer. If you'll recall, Mariner had to do a stint there. And so also Mariner is just very traumatized.
Yeah,
And she is essentially like, you guys should not be thinking anything good is going to happen on Starbase 80. There's, everything is terrible here. And essentially they have to they have to come in and like replace some part on the ship
yeah,
that is not working. And Starbase 80 is the closest, and so they go there, and there's just this really person who's trying to sell them on like Starbase 80. Starbase 80 is great. We all get along here. Don't worry. There's like these Akamerians who actually are like a gang here, but they're not a big deal.
yeah. It really reminds me Starbase 80. Starbase 80. eh, As it turns out, Starbase 80 is basically just a very understaffed and kind of
Yeah.
undersupplied starbase. And it's where Star Trek is. It's where Starfleet basically sends all of their like obsolete equipment. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a ragtag kind of starbase cobbled together from all kind of technology from all kinds of different eras. So you have like reference technological references to Star Trek Enterprise and the original series and the Next Generation era, etc., etc. Um,
It's a hodgepodge, like you said, of all these old quote like useless or vintage things. um Freeman and Ransom have to go off and like find the part, and they need to get the help of like the head engineer on the starbase. So they
yeah,
get sent on like that basically got tricked a little bit by the guy who's actually the engineer
yeah,
into doing small fixes on the starbase, because guess what, there's nobody else to do them. So guess
yeah,
what? This fancy, like California class ship shows up, and these people have the ability to go like fix a leak. Well, of course he's going to get them to do it.
yeah. As I said, it really reminds me of early seasons of Deep Space Nine, like seasons one and
Hmm.
two, like this hodgepodge, old starbase that has like these kind of foreign, the gangs there. There are a lot of gangs on Deep Space Nine at first too. It's like
Uh,
it's very similar. I felt like it's a very similar atmosphere.
yeah. And in the meantime, Mariner has being so paranoid about this quote curse that
Yeah.
exists on Starbase 80. And she feels thinking something's going to happen. And guess what? It does. So it turns out that when the Cerritos crew uses their comm badge, they turn into basically like a zombie.
Yeah.
So we get some kind of zombie esque like little situation going on with Mariner and Boimler and like Tendi and Rutherford, right?
Yeah.
So they're trying to figure out like what is causing the Cerritos crew to be affected, but not everybody else. And it turns out that they don't actually have comm badges on Starbase 80. They're
Yeah.
using your old in the wall communication system.
Yeah.
So it's something through the badge itself, and it turns out it's an entity named Clem. And Clem is not Clem is not actually out there to possess people and cause a zombie apocalypse. Clem is just trying to communicate.
Yeah,
Like little ghost Clem just is kind of sorry. He didn't mean to do that. But in the meantime, Freeman and Ransom they eventually figure out they didn't need a part for their ship. It was Clem. It was also Clem who was affecting their ship, so
yeah,
they're able to leave Starbase 80.
yeah. But it's kind of I kind of like this episode. Starbase 80. It's not the first time we hear about Starbase 80. It was mentioned in previous seasons too. As you said, Mariner did a stint there.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it was always like presented as this like the worst place in Starfleet, essentially, the last place
uh,
you want to end up in.
but it's quite funny because they have like even like a marketplace, right? Just like in Deep Space Nine, where you go and you can
Exactly.
buy like food and little items, and one of the items are like vintage like TOS uniforms,
Yeah.
from Dead Men.
Yeah.
It's quite funny.
Yeah. It
So.
is. Yeah, it's absolutely like it gets a bad reputation, but it's kind of a fun place.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I enjoyed seeing it. I thought it was fun.
Yeah. And so maybe Mariner, she's probably maybe a little less traumatized about Starbase 80. But at the same time, Captain Freeman is like, well, maybe Starbase 80 isn't the worst. It's
Yeah,
just old
it's
and
just
falling
old and
apart,
yeah, and kind of neglected by Starfleet. Like,
neglected.
why
Yeah.
is it? Why is that? Why?
It was cute. It was like a little zombie movie.
Yeah, it was a cute episode. I agree.
uh, so,
Yeah,
next episode.
yeah. Of Gods and Angels. Um, so the Cerritos is hosting peace talks between two two species, or essentially cubes and orbs.
It's great.
It's great, and honestly it's kind of great because it really can only happen with animation. You won't see something like that on Strange New Worlds or Discovery. There is a new ensign on the ship, Ensign Ollie, who's
Hmm.
a descendant of the of the species from the original series that's like a Greek god. So
Yeah, from
she's
like the Apollo episode.
yeah, so she's basically a descendant of the entity that was worshipped as Zeus. Um and she's kind of known as being like very bad at any job she tries to do. um and she's basically kind of keeping Mariner is working with her, and she's trying to like investigate the sun. The urban cube peace talks break apart because the son and daughter of the orbs and the cube's leaders disappeared, and Mariner is tasked with finding them, and this new ensign is tasked to work with her, and she's kind of ruining the investigation.
Well, yeah, she keeps telling him that like the cube was murdered,
Yeah.
and they're like, "Whoa, whoa, we don't know that he's murdered." And then of course that starts like a war. So
Yeah.
much for peace talks. Talks like a reignites tensions between the cubes and the orbs.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of pretty obvious what happened. The Cuban orb
Right.
kids fell in love, and like they ran away together, and they had kids somehow. I don't know how that happened. And that brought back the peace talks. Yeah, this Hansen only kind of discovers kind of reveals her powers, and turns out they're kind of bad. Like they're not very impressive powers, considering she is like descendant of Zeus. But Mariner helps her find something useful to do with those powers, and she can stop being such a disaster, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention that Boimler in the previous episode was up to a goatee.
Yeah.
Again, he's trying to grow this like full facial hair, like his alternate self. So he's up to a goatee. It looks really bad, but now he's got like a goatee and a mustache in this
Yeah.
episode. Boimler is not embroiled in this peacekeeping thing between like orbs and cubes. He's just trying to befriend Dr. Tiana because
Yeah.
guess what? His alternate self was besties with her. And of course, in Boimler style, everything he does gets messed up. He causes like problems in sickbay. He makes Dr. Tiana even angrier. He tries to speak to her in her own language, and like she goes nuts and like tears him up. You know,
Yeah.
so that's what's going on the side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Boimler stuff.
Boimler stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't really of all the species to bring back from the original series. Kind of, I don't know if they made the right choice with this one. I felt like they thought it was funnier than it actually was. Basically, all his powers were like making these lightning rods that were like very unstable, like
Yeah.
floppy, I guess you can say. And it's
Floppy
like,
lightning bolts. That's quite funny.
yeah. But it felt more like it's kind of like a one-time gag that they kind of stretch too much, in my opinion. It's not, I don't know.
Yeah. But it was more interesting to watch Mariner try to coach somebody that's like a loose cannon, kind of like she used to be.
Yeah.
But Ollie was really a loose cannon. I mean, she she caused a lot of problems, and not
Yeah.
just because of
Yes, she
her
did.
inability to control like
Her
and wanting to
powers.
hide her powers, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, Ollie gets a chance to redeem herself by stopping the orb and cube like war going on. And yeah, like you said, and then it's revealed that the kids ran off and got pregnant
Yeah.
and produced children, and they're like a hybrid between like a cube and an orb, and they're just so cute that there's gonna be peace, everlasting peace between the races.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not so disgusting to each other after all.
Beautiful. Yeah. Very inspiring.
Beautiful. So, episode 7, really good one.
Yeah. Fully dilated.
Yeah, fully dilated. Okay. So there is a particular planet, like a pre-industrial planet, okay, called Daimler 3. Yeah. So Daimler 3 is one of those planets where the time that passes on the planet is different than the time passing in space. And so it's some ridiculous ratio, like for every second on the ship is like a week on the planet.
Yeah.
So imagine if you even went a full minute, you're talking like 60 weeks, like over a
Yeah.
year has passed on the planet.
Exactly.
And of course, naturally, there's some kind of dimensional like fissure going on that has brought the Cerritos to this type of space because some type of next generation ship came through. And there is a piece of technology left behind on Daimler 3. And so someone has to go down there and collect that, and they have to do it in a very short period of time such that they're not stuck on the planet forever. um, so Mariner, Tendi, and T'Lyn get to go down to the planet, guess to retrieve this technology that landed there. And guess who's in charge of sending them and bringing them back? It's Boimler and Rutherford.
Of course. And Boimler and Rutherford kind of mess up.
Badly. They're
Yeah.
just Rutherford is now convinced that there's some good stuff on that pad that Boimler took from his alternate self, and they're trying these like really amazing like fruity cocktails. I don't even think they're fruity. They're something.
Yeah.
And inevitably they send down Mariner to Lynn and Tendi to the planet. And they're supposed to bring them back within a few seconds. Well, they spill their drinks all over the console and just short it out.
Yeah.
So they're panicking. And Talin and Mariner and Tendi are stuck on the planet and essentially have to find a place to stay. They have to kind of integrate themselves a little bit in the town that they're near because, they have to act like the locals. Oh, and by the way, they've
Yeah.
actually, in true Star Trek style, they have been given plastic surgery to have like blue hair and like antenna things and to look like the natives, right?
Of course.
They're expecting to be down there for a couple of weeks, and they've already found what the technology was. It was a crashed shuttlecraft that had Data's head left in it.
Of course it's Data's head. It's always Data's
It's always
head.
Data's head. And so, yeah, they're really just waiting for the signal to be beamed back to the ship. And,
Hmm.
obviously that's not going to happen for a while. So they have to settle in. And Tendi and Talin, by the way, both realize that they're up for potential candidates for the science officer position on the ship, on the Cerritos.
Yeah.
And so there's, I'd say from Tendi's side, a little bit of rivalry going on who could be the better science officer, who's better at science. So Talin and Tendi are doing their own science projects during this time. And then, of course, Mariner is being Mariner. She's
Yeah.
off, like chatting with the locals and accidentally getting herself thrown in jail repeatedly. Um, but Tendi wants to know how can she be better at science, like be the better candidate for the science officer position, and she reactivates Data's head. So
Hmm.
during these like 6 or 7 months that they're stuck on the planet, Tendi is getting all this advice from Data, and she's ignoring everybody else. She's like stuck up in the attic doing her experiments. And Talin, meanwhile, is doing what Vulcans do. She's, inspecting the flora and fauna on the planet. She's like growing crops and starting a little business and keeping herself occupied. But she's obviously worried about Tendi being so closeted away. And of course, Mariner being absent all the time because she's in jail. She's trying to make friends,
Hmm.
right? She's like, I'm going to spend a whole lifetime on this planet. I should like get something out of it.
Yeah.
And so when it is all is said and done, this particular local who's been stalking the three, because he finds them very suspicious, basically tries to out them as witches because they have a talking head. Finally, at this point, Boimler and Rutherford have fixed the console and are ready to beam them back. So they essentially have to get back to the ship in one piece. They manage that, and they also managed to repair like the tension that was between Talin and Tendi during the months that they were on the planet.
Yeah. It turns out, Tulane wasn't, the rivalry was very one-sided.
Yes.
It was just Tendi thinking it was a rivalry at all. Um, yeah. Tulane was actually was kind of excited about the chance to work with Tandy, because Tulane really is trying to befriend everyone on the ship, in a Vulcan
Yes.
way, not in a, yeah. And yeah, it was a kind of a sweet conclusion. And at the end, they both became the science officers.
Yeah. Co-science officers.
Co-science officers. Yeah,
So yeah, but they did spend a very long time on that planet.
they did. Yeah.
Uh, And hey, Mariner did make some friends. She made a bunch of friends in prison.
That's very Mariner.
Yeah.
It's extremely Mariner. Yeah.
And I think they sent Data's head back through the rift. I don't know what they did with it.
Yeah, I think probably.
So yeah, so basically Tendi sorry, Tendi and Talin are somewhat friend. They're basically friends now at this point, and they're also co-science officers, so they have to work more closely together. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. That's the
Yeah.
episode. It's a cute episode. It's nice to have an episode, focused on the girls.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Data is of course voiced by Brent Spiner, who is making a guest appearance. If there is one sign I think of, maybe they did know that the show was ending, was the amount of guest appearances toward the end of the season because it's going to ramp up. Yeah.
Yeah. I liked it.
Yeah.
I always enjoy a you know, um integrating into the natives type episode. I mean, we have to have at least one per season, right?
Yeah.
Again, like you said, kind of like a girls episode. It was really nice. And,
Yeah.
you know, Rutherford and Boiler definitely took a back seat the whole time.
Yeah.
They're just panicking for the however many minutes it took them to, clean off the transporter console. Not important.
Yeah.
So. Oh, and by the way, I think it was Data's suggestion that they be co-science officers.
Yeah, maybe.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So that answered my question, which in our last podcast, do you remember, Soto, we were talking about who's the science officer on the Cerritos? I think at this point you probably knew.
Yeah, I kind of hinted that they knew, yeah.
But that had been a question for me, was this was a vacant position. I never had heard that there was a science officer, so we now have them. We now have two on the Cerritos.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's quite a promotion for 2 lieutenants.
Yeah. And they're both happy with it.
Mhm. Okay, episode 8.
Episode 8. Yeah, Upper Decks. This is kind of an inversion of the episode Lower Decks from The Next Generation that the whole show was kind of inspired by. We basically get to see a day in the life of the bridge crew of the Cerritos, which don't usually get focus.
It's overdue.
Well, I mean, they're not that interesting.
They're not that interesting, but it was a nice touch to get to see a day in the lives of the upper deckers.
Yeah. So we mostly follow, Captain Freeman, who is she's kind of a very she runs a very tight ship. Let's say it like that. She's always busy. And we
Stevens is
yeah.
Stevens is managing her schedule.
Yeah, I think she's. Did we ever see basically a captain with a private assistant? Because I think she's the first one.
I think she is the first one.
Yeah, she's that busy.
Yeah, I thought Stevens was like a yeoman. I just didn't realize he was the actual assistant to the captain.
Yeah, he's like her personal yeoman. Yeah. Yeah. We kind of follow around her, and then we kind of branch off to different you know different senior members. There's Billups, who is having equipment failures, because that's always what happens with engineering. There's Ransom, who is trying to coach a team of ensigns to work together, and he's doing it in a very very Ransom sort of way. Yeah.
Dr. Tiana.
Dr. Tiana, naturally. Um,
She
he's dealing with. Yeah.
sorry, I was just saying Dr. So the episode started out with them like having their board meeting essentially, like their daily like senior officer get together. So Shax has to excuse himself because he's having a hallucination.
Oh, yeah.
And so Shaq spends most of his time having like to battle his inner demon, which looks just like him,
Yeah.
except more Borg-like. It's kind of strange, but he's basically he has a lot of PTSD from the war, and,
Yeah, and also the time he died.
and the time he died, and like so he has to take time out apparently to like meditate and get himself in order by like beating up his mental self. That inner voice that keeps telling him he's like a terrible killer.
Yeah.
um and Dr. Tiana got called out for her lack of use or her lack of use of pain medication in sickbay. So
Yeah.
she doesn't want to admit that because apparently she has a pain kink.
Which makes sense if you follow the backstory of her and Shax's relationship. You kind of figured it out.
Yeah, so she just keeps escalating with her like one of her nurses or doctors to cause her more pain so that eventually she
Yeah.
understands what it feels like to actually hurt. So that
Yeah.
she understands the need for pain, pain medication for people who come in
Yeah.
injured into her medical bay.
Yeah. Yeah. Personally, I think Ransom's story was the funniest one,
Yeah.
just because he's so ridiculous. Um, yeah, he essentially makes the ensigns work together by making them all hate him. He claims it was on purpose. I don't know if I believe him.
I'd say the subplot here is that the Clickets, which are actually an insectoid race, have come to like eat the what do they call them? The bagoon, which are basically like space cows.
I
So
guess.
the Cerritos is there studying the space cows, and this insectoid race like eats them. So the space cows are actually pretty nervous, and they're just not cooperating with being like studied, which is partly why like the Delta Shift and the Beta Shift ensigns are fighting, and Ransom has to come like get them to work together. Um,
Yeah.
so it turns out that the Clickets have decided to invade the ship, and they have been pretending they've been in disguise, and then they try to invade the ship, which is just something happens every other day on a starship,
Yeah.
right? So that's what the senior officers have to deal with. They have their own like problems, and then invaders show up and they have to deal with that, which they do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Another day in the life of the bridge crew.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and the Clickets are supposed to be that like throwaway invader race, like, oh, what do you mean you can't even remember who we are? We're going to take over your ship. Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
You're just like, who are you again? Like, what's your like? I don't know. Anyway, Freeman remembers that they don't like to be complimented. She basically runs them off with a bunch of compliments.
Yeah. It was cute. It was a very cute episode. Like you said, it was long overdue, and I guess that's why it kind of felt out of place as like
Hmm.
essentially the last two episodes of the season are like a two-parter final. So
Yeah.
like this one was. basically the penultimate episode in a way, and it kind of felt out of place because it wasn't a very big story. It was just kind of yeah, that's kind of probably a story that we should have done at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to do it in the last 3 episodes of the final season of the show
Yeah.
is out of place. Yeah.
Yeah.
It might have been nice at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, so it was nice, but it was like as I said, kind of out of place. And that leads us to the finale, the actual final. The last two episodes, as I said, are kind of a two-parter. The first one is Fisher Quest. We are back with William Boimler, which, for those who don't remember, he's the clone of Brad Boimler, that was created after a transporter accident. He worked with Riker on the Titan for a while, and then he was supposedly killed, but we know as the viewers that he was actually recruited for some secret Section 31 style mission.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know what exactly he was doing for a bit, but now we kind of discovered that he actually has a ship that whose crew is composed of basically alternate versions of Starfleet officers, all kind of characters from all kinds of different universes. So we have alternate universe Harry Kim and alternate universe Dax. What's his name? The man Dax.
Um. Oh.
uh,
Aleem. No. Sorry. No.
no, no, no.
Sorry. Curzon.
Curzon
Curzon
Dax, an
Dax.
alternate
Yeah.
universe. Curzon Dax, and we also
Yeah.
have alternate universes. Yeah,
Garrick.
Garak and Bashir. Yeah, a lot of fan favorites. A lot of fan favorites coming back. It's a different universe, alternate universe selves, but
Oh, and
yeah.
T'Pol.
Antipole, yeah, that's very nice. The actress who plays T'Pol is actually all the original actors are dubbing their characters, except for Curzon because he wasn't actually on the
Right.
show on Deep Space Nine. But the original actors of Garrick and Bashir from Deep Space Nine and of T'Pol from Enterprise are reprising their roles. And it's especially sweet in the case of T'Pol because her actress was avoiding like cameos
Mm-hmm.
and conventions for a very long time. She just wanted to to keep it low key. She didn't like the attention, but I guess they convinced her to do this, and that's very sweet. And yes, also Harry Kim from Voyager, who turns out to be a pretty big plot point.
There's a
um,
lot of Harry Kims on that ship. The crew is
yeah,
comprised of Harry Kims,
mostly Harry
except for the
Kims.
other
Yeah,
names that we mentioned.
yeah,
um, so it's interesting. They like introduce us to what these alternate characters have been up to. Like T'Pol, this T'Pol's was married for like 63 years. Um,
yeah.
Curzon is, well, he's a Dax, so he feels like when it's time for him to pass on his symbiote, he's not going to be able to do that. So he's kind of in a bind.
Yeah,
Obviously, the one Harry Kim, like the most recent who shows up, is a lieutenant. This is like shocking to all the other Harry Kims because they're all still ensigns.
yeah,
And then you have Garrick and Bashir who are married, and
yeah,
they're basically kind of like having a married couple fight over whose reality they're going to live in once they finish the mission.
yeah. And the mission for the record mission is to find the source of all the interdimensional rifts we've been seeing all season, and stop them because apparently they're tearing the universe apart. And they do discover the source. Apparently, Lily Sloan,
Mm.
um, who is a character for those who don't remember, she's a friend of Zephram Cochrane.
Mm-hmm.
She appeared in the First Contact movie. Um, is an alternate version of her at least had a ship in her reality instead of traveling space. They're basically traveling universes, found a way to travel between universes instead of between traveling spaces, and she discovered it instead of Zephyr Cochrane,
Hmm.
as they did in the main universe. Um, what happens is, of course, that Harry Kim, the lieutenant one, the newest addition to the crew, is very upset about the treatment of Harry Kims throughout the universe, the universes, the multiverse. Um, and he decides to hijack her ship, Lily Sloan's ship, the one that can travel the multiverse, and take them all. They take all the Kims to a reality where they can be respected. Um,
Yeah. Oh, in the
yeah,
meantime, William Boimler is really sick of
yeah,
his stint through these alternate realities. He's basically like, no matter which version we see, it's all just some different flavor of the same thing. But then
yeah,
Mariner an alternate Mariner kind of comes through one of the rifts, and he transports her onto the ship before a shuttle blows up. And it turns out this Mariner is not quite like the one he remembers. She
yeah,
is an engineer, and
yeah.
she's not a like
A
daredevil
wild card.
wild card.
Yeah, yeah. She's kind of timid. She's kind of more scared. Um, she has a better sense of self preservation.
Hmm.
She doesn't like taking risks. Um, yeah, so the Hurricanes, they steal Lily Stone's ship, and they intend to move to a different well, the main Hurricane wants to move them all to a different reality. The other Kims aren't so happy about this idea, but he does it anyway, and he basically destabilizes the fabric of the
Hmm.
universe. And desperate for help, William Boimler sends a message to his other self, calling for help.
Yep. And
Yeah,
when they ask him why he does it, he says because he knows that Boimler, with all his friends, will be able to save the universe, save the multiverse.
Ye-
He
yeah.
trusts them.
As you can, yeah, as you can imagine, Prime Boimler is not very happy about the message.
He freaks out.
Yeah,
Insane. Um,
yeah,
so this episode in particular was, I mean, it was quite entertaining to see the variations. So obviously all the characters on the ship, but then we got to see like when Lily Sloan's ship, the Beagle, crash
yeah,
lands on the bog planet, we get to see again that creature that remember that drinks bones that was from like the
yeah,
menagerie episode seasons ago.
yeah.
Yeah, we got to see like their actual race. um
What was it called? The Moopsie or something?
yeah, they called it like the Moopsie, but here they have they're the Moopsie, but they live on this planet with a different name. It's like Calo- Calopa or something.
Yeah,
A bog planet. So
yeah,
um just the back and forth between Garrick and Bashir was quite hilarious. I think probably a lot of fans were satisfied by that.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. That was very, very well received fan
Fan
service.
service, yeah.
Yeah,
It was pure fan service. T'Pol, kept kind of arguing like a married couple with Curzon.
yeah,
She more like telling him that all these like his aggressive attitude was out of place and not appropriate.
basically, yeah.
But then spoiler, Curzon dies
Of course.
and she has to absorb essentially the katra of the symbiote, which is like I can imagine how many hundreds of years and
Yeah,
lives. So there was a lot of like detail put into this particular
yeah.
episode.
Honestly, I really like this ragtag crew of like different
Hmm.
alternate versions of. Yeah, it's basically a lot of things that people wanted to see. Like a lot of, like I said, a lot of people wanted to see Bashir and Garrick end up together, and in this alternate universe they do. A lot of people wanted Tipple and Trip to be together, and this alternate universe they did end up together, and they were married for a long time. A lot of people were curious about Curzon because we kept hearing about it, but we never actually saw him.
Yeah.
And this,
Yeah, they just oh, and just Harry Kim's period.
so it was kind of both fan service, but in the style that Lower Decks does really well. The kind of like, yeah, this is the thing we should have been seeing all along.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And it answers the question we have had for so long: what happened to the clone?
Yeah, exactly.
So that was one of things on our list, right, for the season.
Yeah, we want to know what happened to William Boimler. Yeah, so this is us to, of course, the series finale, the last part of this two-parter, where, well, unsurprisingly, the Cerritos crew does manage to save the universe,
Hmm.
not the world, the universe.
One more comment about the
Yeah,
Fissure Quest. I love that they called it like the quantum reality. And that Lily Sloan's mission was basically like like the Federation's mission, Starfleet's mission, but for multiverses instead of just the one universe. They had a
yeah,
prime directive where they don't interfere. Um, and they basically explored all these different universes, alternate realities, um, just to see, as she put it, the human potential. Like, what do
exactly.
humans do? How much they accomplish in every type of reality, or most realities. And so that's how she gets William Boimler to come along to become more invested in what his job is right then, which is the quantum reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that happens in the second part, I believe, when she kind of
Yeah.
explains that. Yeah, that it's not about discovering always discovering new things. It's about discovering things about ourselves.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
So, cut to final episode.
yeah. The cut to final episode. Um, yeah, just it basically is that the Cerritos crew, with the help of kind of characters we've seen all throughout the season. We get Ma back, we get Ollie back, we get the crew of the Starbase 80 back. Um, they all kind of uh, band together and help save the universe.
Yeah. It's called The New
Yeah,
Next Generation.
yeah,
Um, so we start out with Ma. So Ma and Malor are really encounter a couple of Klingon ships, and of course one of them's manned by the sister of the two brothers who have now died at Ma's hands.
yeah.
Her name's Relga, and she, of course, wants vengeance. She hates Ma.
Of course,
So she
because she's
chases
Klingon.
Ma and Malor essentially into Federation space, where they try to seek asylum. Um, and at the same time, obviously, this huge volatile fissure is about to blow up all the universes. And it keeps changing. They find a way to mitigate the ripple effect of the rift, because that ripple effect will actually physically change them to some other reality. So it'll like change
Yeah,
what the ship looks like. It'll change the people, and they managed to create
yeah,
like this shield around the hull, that in a sense protects the crew inside from being altered, but the ship itself gets altered so many times. It's amazing.
mm-hmm.
And obviously, the Cerritos is like, why do we have to be the ones to save the multiverse? And they're like, oh well, the Enterprise is too far out.
Yeah,
And it's like time critical, mission.
yeah,
If you don't go fix this, this huge like bomb, like, then we're all gonna implode.
exactly.
So not their usual, like, universe saving, it's not their usual, flavor of mission, but they rise to the challenge.
Yeah. I mean, like we know they would. We know they would. Yeah.
So, yep. It,
Um. Eventually, I mean, eventually the rift stays open. It
yes.
doesn't close. They kind of ride with this philosophy that multiverse exploring is not necessarily a bad thing, and now Starfleet can explore other universes too.
Yeah. So,
Hmm.
and they can't, like you said, they can't actually close the rift, so they kind of create, it's Malore's idea, right? He just
Yeah.
says, if you're going to have like a flood, right, how do you control it? You put a dam up. So
Yeah.
essentially they like have they've contained the energy of the rift, and it creates like an open portal. um that means, yeah, like you said, not just exploring the galaxy, but exploring potentially other realities.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and because Starbase 80 is the oldest starbase with the oldest technology, it's the least affected by the energy that comes off of this multiverse rift. So it basically becomes the starbase that oversees that rift, and Captain Freeman decides to move there to captain it and oversee the rift, which means that the Cerritos is now going to need a new captain. It's not Mariner. If someone von Mariner is going to become a captain, no, it's Ransom.
uh
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, things are changing. Things are changing on the Cerritos. Yeah,
Yeah.
Mariner is promoted to his first officer.
Yep. Isn't
Oh no, he Boimler and
Boimler
Mariner
and
are
Mariner
both
together?
promoted. Yeah,
Oh, and I
uh,
forgot to mention that Rutherford has been having some problems with his implant, and it was causing him to
yeah,
like hate working on the Cerritos. And by the end of this episode, he has decided to get rid of his implant.
yeah. Interesting because we started. It is kind of a bookend. We started the series with Rutherford kind of getting used to his implants, um, and not knowing where he got them. You
Yep.
remember that at first he didn't know, if you remember how he got them. We started with Boimler, just joining in, just taking his first steps in Starfleet. Um, and now he and Mariner are both provisional first officers. Um, Rutherford is back to being fully human with no cybernetic parts. And Talene and Tandy are the joint science officer. A lot of joint manning of positions going around.
I really was surprised by how much I enjoyed the last episode. You know how it is when it's the final episode of the season or the show itself, and you're just like, it could
Yeah,
go any which way. It could leave you with a cliffhanger. It could, like, in worst case scenario, ruin it
yeah,
for you. But
yeah,
I left with like what we usually do with Star Trek, like a sense of like a hopeful feeling, and feeling very optimistic, and that people landed, or the characters landed in the right place.
yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I think they landed in the right place. The one thing it kind of bothered me is like they can kind of completely ignore the relationship between Rutherford and Tandy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So how about we just take like the lower deckers, and we can include Talin
yeah,
in this, and just kind of talk quickly through like their overall journey, like what problems they started with and where they ended up.
yeah, yeah,
Because they all had overarching like themes, like growth potential.
yeah. I think I joked at first about like Boimler's journey growing the bird, but like growing the bird is it's kind of a phrase that kind of means it's a kind of a popular phrase that means that the show is finding its stride,
Hmm.
and it was specifically created about Star Trek because Riker, in the Next
Yeah.
Generation, Riker grew a beard between seasons. What was it, 1 and 2, or 2 or 3?
Hmm.
And basically, people kind of consider the show considered is the as the marker where the show started to get good. So when a show grows the beard, it means that it's becoming good. It's finally stride. And the funny thing is, in the Next Generation, it happened like between episodes. Like we don't see him grow in a beard. We just one episode is without a beard, and the next episode he has a beard. Um, but um, in this season, is like Boimler is slowly growing the beard. He's not just suddenly becoming, his ultimate self. He took some time to grow, to make mistakes, and eventually he has his full beard like he wanted.
Um, I mean, yeah, his that's such a good analysis of once again what Boimler's trying to do, which is find his best version.
Yeah,
He's always like from season to season, Boimler started out as a very like he's always been very ambitious, but he's been very clumsy
yeah,
at getting the attention from the seniors, impressing the seniors, doing his missions well. He's had a lot of uh, like bumps along the way. Even when he
yeah,
took that stint off on another ship, right? And he's like, "Oh, I'm getting a promotion. I'm getting to like go on a more prestigious ship, Riker's ship." And
yeah,
yet he still ends back up on the Cerritos and continuing to like grow in his confidence as an actual um as an officer who has command potential, right? And so when he
yeah,
sees that alternate self who is a commander essentially, who has seems to have people's respect and seems to be very confident in like leading a crew, he wants that so bad. He's trying
yeah,
to fast track himself there and he thinks he can use a cheat sheet.
yeah, exactly.
But there
But
did come a time in the series where we did feel like Boimler had matured.
of course, yeah. I mean, I remember the first season we were kind of that Bummer is kind of annoying.
Yeah.
We didn't really we weren't big fans of his character, but he definitely improved over time.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
So he grew on me is the way I would put
Yeah.
it
I
throughout
think,
the
yeah, he
show.
grew in general. I mean, at first he was very, a stickler for the rules and kind of a nerd, but in a way that was like a lot less endearing. Yeah, he did. He grew. He grew in general.
Let's go from him to Rutherford.
Rutherford. I think Rutherford is like the character that changed the least
Yeah.
from beginning to end of the series. Like, yeah, he took off his implants at the last episode, but I didn't feel like there was like a long arc building up for him to do that.
Sometimes he just really felt more like a plot device.
Yeah, I agree.
um
I think,
mm,
the biggest part of his character that was like, he's kind of chipper. He likes his job and he's good at it, and that's basically it. um he had an interesting story, at first, as we mentioned, of discovering how and why he got those implants, which he didn't
right.
remember getting. um but even though we kind of found out that, he used to be a lot, edgier and bitter, and kind of a jerk, basically. And he kind of changed because of the implants, but he likes who he is now. So he has no reason to go back to being, who he used to be.
Hmm.
um And but so aside from that, his biggest like personal story is about his relationship with Tandy, and that's kind of went nowhere.
Yeah,
Which yeah,
it was a big question mark we had going into this season. Like, will they, want they kind of
yeah,
question, because Tindy and Rutherford have always been close. Sometimes they've kind of been like at the line of being more than friends, but then they've always backed off
yeah,
from it. And so, like you said, this last season it actually didn't address it at all until that like
yeah,
very last episode, where she, like, I can't remember, she gave him like a kiss on the cheek or something, and he blushed, but that was it. That still
yeah.
leaves us nowhere closer to their best friends, but will they ever take advantage of a potential to be more than friends? So,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, every other character has like a personal
yeah.
journey. Like as I said, Boimler is, is starting off in Starfleet and he wants to advance. Mariner has basically her trauma to deal with, which makes her like a wild card and kind
Hmm.
of a danger to herself and Anders sometimes, that she had to deal with. Um, Tandy has her Orion heritage to contend with. Even Talene had her, at her uh, at her journey, a slightly shorter journey of dealing with, being a Vulcan on a human ship and dealing with the fact that she doesn't really fit into Vulcan society.
Right.
Um, but yeah, but Rutherford in comparison is just kind of there. That's why he feels like a plot device very
Yeah.
often.
But not to undermine some of the entertaining things that he did, like Badgie.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. He was entertaining. I'm not
Yeah.
saying he wasn't.
Yeah.
He just didn't feel like as much of a full character as the others
Hmm.
did.
And I think by comparison, he got a lot less like main focus in an episode the way the others did at different points.
Yeah, exactly. Because as I said, he
Hmm.
doesn't really have a big
Yeah.
storyline. He doesn't really have a personal journey to go
Yeah.
through. He starts out chipper and enjoying his job, and he ends up chipper and enjoying his job. He's kind of
He's
the
just
same
without an
place.
implant now.
Yeah,
Yeah. Tendi.
Tandy.
Tendi is a little bit of um, one of the stars of the show for me, because
Yeah, me
she's an
too.
Orion. We've always wanted to know more about Orions. They teased us, like, in the beginning seasons of Orion culture. And
Yeah,
she seemed happy to be in Starfleet, to be getting to do science, trying to figure out, like which department she really likes, science or medical, just trying to grow into being a Starfleet officer, but at the same time, trying to be like, don't look over here. You don't need to know much about who I was before Starfleet.
yeah. Tandy is a very interesting character because in her in the Orion culture, she's kind of the Orion culture is matriarchal, and she's kind of the heiress of
Hmm.
her family's faction of the syndicate, of the Orion syndicate. And you can see she was trained for it. She's a very good
Hmm.
fighter. She's she does have an aggressive and competitive side. But because she doesn't enjoy that, she wants to be, she enjoys science. She wants to be a scientist. She wants to work in the scientific field. She wants to work in Starfleet. She kind of suppressed that side for a bit, and she's kind of nervous whenever it comes up.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so well, she does reconcile with her family at the beginning of the season. There's still the point of like, she wants to be the science officer, and she's very aggressive and competitive about it. Um, and then she's kind of like,
But she doesn't want to let her, like, mistress of the winter constellations come out in front
yeah,
of her
basically she
friends.
doesn't, yeah, she doesn't want to be defined by her Orion
Yeah.
culture. Yes, so yeah, she's basically my favorite character. Yeah, she's very very good.
Hmm. Um, so it's really interesting that we kind of get to see her mystery resolved a little bit at a time, until we get to like the season 4 and this season,
Yeah,
where she basically gets shoved back into her her culture and kind of reconcile with herself why she left and where she really wants to be. So, and also reconcile with her
Yeah.
family, right, to an extent.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah. So she
yeah.
also, in a sense, it gets to feel like she gets to be like more like herself
Exactly.
by the end.
She gets to find out who she really
Yeah.
is. Yeah. And feel comfortable with herself.
Yep.
Yeah. And of course Mariner. Uh, she's great. As I said at the beginning, she is a very much a wild card. She is an ensign, like everybody else, but she very obviously has been in Starfleet way longer than everybody else. She's way more competent than everybody else, which kind of brought up the mystery of why she's still an ensign if she's so competent and talented and knows and has been around for so long. And it's not the Harry Kim situation where doesn't get promoted for no reason. Um, she was apparently at some point, promoted, but because of trauma that was dealt with last season, basically in season
Hmm.
4, um, she basically lost her faith in Starfleet and started acting out, and intentionally got demoted because she was just too afraid of what might happen um, if she has command, if she has to make tough decisions that can hurt other
Yeah.
people. Yeah. So she kind of adopted this wild card personality, this like attitude, because she doesn't want to take responsibility for other people, but then she dealt with it, and now she feels a lot more confident about, going back and achieving her original goals. She does like Starfleet. There's a reason she hasn't quit despite everything, because she does like Starfleet. She does like working there.
Even though she did have a brief stint with being like a space archaeologist and like a
Oh
rogue,
yeah,
a
very brief.
rogue who
Yeah,
steals artifacts and sells them.
yeah,
But yeah, you're right. Her by the end, her faith in Starfleet was restored. Her very contentious relationship with her mother because she was acting out is actually resolved. Yeah, I think she gets to restart the path that she had originally been on, feeling like she's actually doing it for the right reasons.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
But she's still a bit of a she's not a loose cannon anymore, but she's still that Kirk style
Yeah,
character.
I mean, yeah, she's still Mariner. She's
She's a
still
little
very
bit of a
bold.
maverick always.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, and our latest edition is Tilene. Yeah, we got to know her the least, but she is very, very enjoyable as a character. Um, she became a favorite very, very quickly. Tilene, she started off on a Vulcan vessel, a Vulcan-sized vessel, where she was kind of ostracized for her very human methods
Hmm.
of having like hunches and instincts and other non-Vulcan, non-logical things. And she was basically sent to serve on the Cerritos on a human ship as a punishment. But she grew to enjoy the Cerritos and the crew, and of course our lower deck crew. And again, that was all last season. She
Hmm.
decided to stay, and this season she's more about making connections with people on the ship. Um, yeah, she's trying to befriend them all. She befriends Tandy, she befriends Rutherford. She's trying to understand them.
Let me ask, if you had to rank these 5 characters, these 5 lower deckers, from like your favorite to your least favorite.
Oh,
So my can I give you mine?
yeah, you can give me yours.
Mine would be it would be Tendi, to Lynn because I love a Vulcan.
Yeah.
Mariner, um, Boimler, and Rutherford.
Yeah, I think I agree with this ranking. Yeah.
Yep. And it surprises me because if you'd asked me from the first 2 seasons where Boimler would be, I would have been like, he's at the bottom just because he is so dorky and annoying and trying to like brown nose that it irritates me. But like I said, he
Yeah.
grew on me, so he actually moved up in a rank. And while I like
Yeah.
Rutherford, he's just like you said, we just didn't get as much like character growth out of him.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so, it really is kind of amazing how much character growth and story they got out of this show.
Hmm.
Because as I said at the very beginning, it's a very short show compared to other shows. Even compared to like Picard. Picard only had 3 seasons, and but because it had such long episodes, it got more time to do things with it, but it didn't get as much story out of Picard as we did with Lord
Yeah.
Dex.
And I
Yeah.
think one of the things I appreciated was how much, like you said, how much they packed into an episode, but also just like fan service they packed into this show. They didn't
Yeah.
have to do
So
that
much.
much, have that many jokes, like little details in the background, and they did it anyway, and it was glorious.
Yeah.
um, I would rewatch this whole show, not just because the characters, it was a positive, like, journey for all of them, but because there was just so much fan service to enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In general, it seems like the 5 seasons is the standard for this modern
Yeah.
era, right?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think so. Um,
Yeah.
the only thing that kind of threw me off out of this whole show was that period in time in which they kind of made it seem like Mariner and Boimler might be more than friends, but they never brought that back up in this season. I'm glad they didn't. It was
Yeah.
awkward. In fact, I'm kind of actually
Yeah.
happy that they landed on no official more than friends for anybody.
Yeah. As I said, I thought I wanted them to deal with Waterford and Tandy. I wouldn't have minded if they ended up together, but I also kind of wouldn't have minded if they
Right.
didn't and just kind of deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know how it is. Like they're all young in their careers. You know, things change over time. So
Yeah.
the only relationship that ever entertained me was Shax and Dr. Tiana.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and we forgot to mention, we finally got to see Mariner's dad, like more than just a screen, like a screenshot.
Yeah, he actually joined her mom on base 80 at the end of the show.
um, yeah.
Um, yeah, they no longer have to have a distant relationship, a long distance relationship.
Uh-huh. And he showed up in Upper Decks at the end where Stevens made sure that he got to come visit her for their anniversary.
Yeah.
So, yep. Yeah, that was entertaining.
Yeah.
What's your favorite bridge officer?
Oh, bridge officer. Oh, probably Tiana. Probably Tiana.
She was a wild cat,
Yeah.
so to speak. I really love Shax because
Yeah, Shax is also pretty good.
he like calls everybody baby bear, and he's doing this like social club, and yet he is
Yeah.
just so into violence and he died once and came back. I mean, come on,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
more could you want?
Exactly.
I liked Captain Freeman.
Captain Freeman's
She was a
good. Yeah.
solid captain.
Yeah.
She definitely was that like older, mature captain, and the fact that she could handle her daughter when needed was a plus. Because Mariner
Yeah.
was off the rails at some points. um, anything else?
Nothing comes to mind. Anything for you?
Um, back to your original comment about whether or not you think they knew.
Mm.
Now that we've talked about like all the episodes, for me, I began to feel like it was less of a just like a one-off episode by the time we got to Upper Decks. So basically the last 3 episodes, I was like, to me it felt as if they were trying to check off the box or close some open threads. And it may just be
Yeah.
because I
I can say
wanted them
that.
to do that. I wanted to know where the clone was. I wanted to know like how they would like move up in their promotions on the ship. There's just certain things I had on my list that, and they all kind of were present in the season, but not in the beginning of the season. Other than Tendi coming back to the ship, which we knew would happen.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as I said, because of all the cameos at the last two episodes,
Yeah.
especially, it did kind of feel maybe they did new, because why else would they have so many cameos? You know,
Yeah.
we have Data and Bashir and
Yeah.
Garrick and yeah,
Yep.
and Lily Sloan and T'Pol, yeah, and Harry Kim. Like, that's a lot of cameos.
That's such a
Yeah,
good point.
yeah.
Um so anyway, I very sad to see this show has ended. I felt very positive on the way that it ended, and if for some reason they were ever to do a sequel
Or a
or a
movie. Maybe they can
movie,
make a movie.
or
Yeah.
another, like these characters show up in another show like they do in Strange New Worlds, I would be all for
Yeah.
it because they were great.
Yeah. Yeah. Me
Yeah.
too.
I think that concludes our review of the final season of Lower Decks. And if our listeners haven't been able to tell, Soda and I just truly thought this was a gem of a show. We've said we wouldn't mind seeing it come back in some fashion, or at least having some of those characters referenced in other shows, because it was truly a great watch from start to finish.
Yeah, we enjoyed it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most of the fans would agree. Most of
Mm-hmm.
Star Trek fans would have agreed.
Yeah.
Obviously, the show's fans would agree.
So now they just have to fill this vacuum that they're going to create with this show. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I heard that, the actress who plays Mariner, Tawny Newman, I think
mhm.
is her name. She and another person whose name I've forgotten, they are working on a new comedy series for Star
It's
Trek.
not Jack Quaid, is it?
No, no, someone
Um,
else. But they are working on a new Star Trek comedy series. It's still kind of vague, so there isn't like a
mhm.
very set concept. It's not the Academy show; it's a different show.
Okay.
And she's going to be a writer on Starfleet Academy, the
Well,
show
good.
that's going to come up.
Good to retain
Yeah,
talents because
yeah,
we need them in the franchise.
yeah,
All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening, and feel free to share your thoughts and opinions with us. So until next time.
yeah. Bye, everybody.